We almost paused on this one, not because the facts were unclear, but because the silence around them felt heavy. A mother came home early, and something ordinary didn't line up. Sometimes that's all it takes. Rebecca Nolan is a working mother in her mid-30s. What happened to her matters because it didn't start with violence or shouting. It started with absence. This is where she begins. I remember the sound first. Not a scream, not a crash. Just the click of my suitcase handle locking back into place when I let go of it. Miles. My voice carried down the hallway before I even thought about it. Hey, I'm home. No answer. I walked into his room expecting the usual mess. The bed was made, too neatly. His shoes weren't by the door. His backpack wasn't on the chair. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. Patricia, where's Miles? A pause. Breathing on the other end. He's fine. He's with your brother tonight. With Ethan, I leaned against the wall. Since when does Ethan do sleepovers? It was last minute, she replied. He wanted to spend time with him. I stared at the empty bed. You didn't text me. You were traveling, she said. I didn't want to bother you. Something tightened in my chest. Put him on. Another pause. Longer this time. He's asleep. We're quiet here at Revenge Mosaicum, but this was the moment the room shifted. Nothing dramatic. Just a mother realizing the story didn't fit. I hung up and opened the tracking app tied to Miles's watch. The screen took a second to load. When it did, the dot wasn't moving. I whispered, "That's not Ethan's address." If you're listening and you've ever trusted the wrong calm voice, stay with this. I stood there longer than I should have, phone glowing in my hand, waiting for the map to correct itself. It didn't. The location text sat under the dot, steady and wrong. Pine Hollow Memorial Grounds. I grabbed my keys and bolted. My hands were shaking so violently I nearly dropped them twice before reaching the driveway. I called 911 on speakerphone as I threw the car into reverse. 911, what is the address of your emergency? My son is missing. He's 8, I choked out. His GPS watch is pinging at Pine Hollow Cemetery. The dispatcher's tone shifted instantly from routine to high alert. Ma'am, I am dispatching officers to that location immediately. Do not go there yourself. Stay in your home and wait for a supervisor. I'm already driving, I said, my voice cracking. I'm not waiting. Ma'am, listen to me, she urged, her keyboard clicking like rapid gunfire. We have units en route with a 3-minute ETA. If there is an active abductor, your presence could escalate the danger to your son. Pull over and wait for the patrol car. I didn't pull over. I accelerated. The fog hung low over the Hattiesburg roads, thick enough that my high beams felt dull and useless. The dashboard clock read 2:07 a.m. I'm 10 minutes away, I told her, ignoring her command. I'm not letting him sit there alone in the dark. Ma'am, if you enter that perimeter, we cannot guarantee your safety. Please, I muted the call. I didn't turn on the music. I didn't roll the window down. I just followed the blinking dot into the narrowing trees, a mother choosing instinct over every law of logic. The gate was already open. That's the first thing I noticed, one side sagging, the other resting against a tree like a jaw unhinged. I cut the engine and stepped out, the silence of the cemetery rushing in to meet me. I'm inside. I whispered into the phone. The dispatcher started to protest, but I lowered the device, letting her voice fade into the fog. I used my phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through the mist to illuminate rows of weathered limestone. My shoes slipped on the damp earth. Then, I saw a shape near the far fence. Miles was sitting on the freezing ground, his knees pulled tight to his chest, thick yellow rope looped around his wrists, tethering him to the rusted iron bars. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even moving. He looked like a statue. Miles. I dropped to my knees, my hands fumbling for his face. He was ice cold. Hey, it's Mom. I've got you. His eyes were wide, vacant. I stayed still, he whispered, his voice trembling so hard it was barely audible. Uncle Ethan said if I made a sound, the shadows would hide you and you'd never find the way in. The sheer cruelty of the lie made my stomach turn. He wasn't just quiet, he was psychologically paralyzed. I tore at the knots. My fingers were numb, but the rope finally gave way. I pulled him into my jacket, feeling the violent shivers racking his small frame. I was quiet. He whimpered into my neck. I didn't let them hide you. You did perfect, baby. You're safe. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind us. I spun around, keeping Miles shielded behind my body. Ethan stood near the silhouette of his sedan, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked less like a kidnapper and more like a man drowning. "Rebecca," he said, his voice flat and exhausted. He didn't move toward us. He just stood there, clutching a crumpled envelope in his shaking hand. "You weren't supposed to be home. I just needed you to see. I needed you to understand how desperate this has gotten. You tied him to a fence. Ethan." I stood my ground as the first faint pulse of blue and red light began to flicker against the distant tree line. There is no understanding this. Ethan took one step back when the sirens got louder. Not running, just recalculating. "Rebecca, listen," he started. His hands lifted, palms out, like that made anything better. "This got out of hand. You tied my son to a fence," I said. My voice sounded flat, like it belonged to someone else. "That's not out of hand. That's past it." He wasn't hurt. Miles shifted behind me. I felt his fingers twist into the fabric of my coat. "He's freezing," I told Ethan, "and he's terrified." Ethan glanced at the road. "I was coming back. You left." For a minute, his jaw tightened. I needed space. I needed you to slow down and actually hear me. "This is how you do that." I pulled Miles closer. "This is how you talk to me now." He ran a hand through his hair. "You're not listening to how bad things are." "I'm listening," I said. "I just don't care the way you want me to." Red and blue lights flickered through the trees. The sound was close now. Ethan's shoulders dropped. "You didn't have to call them. I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," he snapped, then caught himself. His voice lowered. "We're family." 2 officers came through the gate, boots heavy on the gravel. "Ma'am," one of them called out. "Are you Rebecca Nolan?" "Yes." He looked at Miles, then at the rope still hanging loose from the fence. "Sir," the other officer said to Ethan, "step away from them." Ethan hesitated. Just a second too long. "Step away now." He did. I didn't watch them take him. I kept my eyes on Miles, counting his breaths until the night stopped spinning. The back of the ambulance smelled like disinfectant and plastic. Miles sat wrapped in a silver blanket, his knees tucked up, his head pressed into my side. A woman in scrubs leaned in. "Sweetheart, I'm going to check your hands." "Okay." He nodded once, didn't look up. An officer stood a few feet away. Notebook open. "Ma'am, I need to ask you a few questions." I shifted so Miles stayed covered. "Go ahead." "When did you last have physical custody of your son yesterday afternoon? And you located him tonight using a tracking device?" "Yes." "His watch." He wrote that down. The pen scratched loudly in the quiet. "Based on what we observed," he continued, "this is being logged as first-degree kidnapping and child endangerment." The words landed heavy, even though I already knew them. "Is my son coming with me?" "Yes." The medic answered. "We're taking him in for observation." Another officer stepped closer. "Your brother is being transported for booking." I nodded. My mouth felt dry. Miles finally spoke. "Am I in trouble?" "No," I told him, brushing his hair back. "You didn't do anything wrong." The officer glanced at him, then back to me. His voice softened. "We'll need a statement later. Not tonight, if you don't want. Tomorrow." I said, "I can do tomorrow." The ambulance doors closed with a dull thud. As it pulled away, I watched the red lights fade and focused on keeping my hand steady on Miles's shoulder. The hospital room hummed softly, machines blinking in a rhythm that felt steadier than my own breathing. Miles slept with one arm flung over the blanket, a light left on near the door. My mother came in without knocking. "Oh, Rebecca." Her voice dropped low as she crossed the room. "Thank God he's all right." She didn't touch him. She stood at the foot of the bed and looked at me instead. "You shouldn't have called the police like that," she continued. Ethan panicked. "That's all this was." I stayed seated. "You told me he was asleep." She waved a hand. "I didn't think it mattered. I thought he'd be home before you even noticed." "You knew he wasn't." Her mouth tightened. "He said he was taking Miles for a bit. Just to talk to you. To get your attention." "My attention," I repeated. She stepped closer. "You know how he gets when he's stressed. He didn't mean any harm." I pulled my phone out and tapped the screen. The recording filled the room. Her own voice played back, calm and certain, telling me my son was safe. She didn't flinch. I was trying to protect him. From what? From prison. She folded her arms. From ruining his life. I stood up slowly. "You gave him the spare key." Her eyes dropped to the floor. Silence stretched between us. A nurse passed by the door and glanced in, then kept walking. "I trusted you," I said. The words came out quieter than I expected. My mother swallowed. "I didn't think it would go this far." I turned back to Miles and adjusted the blanket. "You always think that." The rain started just after midnight, a rhythmic drumming that blurred the security lights outside. Jonah and I sat in the dark office, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in his tired eyes. "The system's armed," he whispered. We hadn't truly slept since the night at Pine Hollow. Upstairs, Miles slept with a lamp on a small lighthouse against the trauma we couldn't quite wash away. The alert didn't scream. It buzzed. Basement window. Glass break detected. Jonah's hand tightened on the mouse. My heart didn't race. It went cold. The phone vibrated instantly, the security firm's monitoring center. Silent alarm confirmed. Jonah told the dispatcher, his voice tight. "We're in the secure room. He's inside. Officers are 3 minutes out. Stay behind the locked door," the voice replied. We watched the basement feed. Ethan crawled through the jagged remains of the window. He looked gaunt, his jacket torn, his movements frantic. He wasn't looking for jewelry or electronics. He was muttering to himself, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. "He's losing it," Jonah murmured. We watched him sprint toward the study. He knew exactly where our father's old oak cabinet was. He began clawing at the lock with a screwdriver, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I realized then that he wasn't just greedy. He was being hunted. The gambling debts weren't just numbers anymore. They were people waiting for him outside these walls. He needed the house deed, or a signed power of attorney, or anything he could use as leverage to stay alive. The room suddenly flooded with red and blue light through the windows. Ethan froze, the screwdriver slipping from his numb fingers. When the front door burst open, he didn't even try to run. He just fell to his knees, his face a mask of total, exhausted defeat. "Wait," he croaked as the officers swarmed him. "They're going to kill me if I don't get it. I didn't feel pity. I just watched the camera until they dragged him out into the rain." I looked at the monitor showing Miles's empty hallway. The house was quiet again, but the safety we once knew was a ghost. The courtroom was a vacuum of dry air and hard oak. Ethan stood as the judge entered, his frame gaunt, hands trembling against the defense table. The prosecutor's voice was clinical as he listed the counts: first-degree kidnapping, child endangerment, and felony burglary while on pretrial release. Each word felt like a nail being driven home. When given the chance to speak, Ethan's voice was a pathetic rasp. "I never meant to hurt him. I'm his family." The judge didn't blink. Family is a sanctuary, Mr. Nolan. You turned it into a hunting ground. Intent does not erase the trauma of an 8-year-old child tied to a fence in the dark. The sentence followed 15 years without parole. Then, the judge turned his gaze to my mother, sitting in the front row. The evidence shows Patricia Nolan didn't just overlook her son's actions. She facilitated them by providing keys and misleading investigators even after the kidnapping. Therefore, the court issues a permanent order of protection. You are barred from any contact with Miles Nolan for the duration of his minority. My mother's choked sob was the only sound in the room. I didn't turn around. I just felt Jonah's hand tighten on mine, the heavy weight of the law finally providing the shield I had been fighting for alone. We moved a few months later, a smaller place near the water, fewer rooms, fewer corners. Miles started therapy once a week. Some nights he still slept with the light on. I stopped trying to change that. I just sat on the edge of the bed and waited until his breathing evened out. One afternoon, a letter came. The return address was a correctional facility. I opened it, read the first line, then folded it back up. It still isn't my fault. It said, I didn't feel angry, just finished. I carried it to the fireplace and let the paper curl and disappear. Jonah watched from the doorway. He didn't ask. Later that night, Miles padded into the living room, dragging his blanket behind him. He climbed onto the couch and leaned against my side. "Can the light stay on?" he murmured. "Of course." I reached for the lamp, turned it on, then left my hand there for a second longer than needed. I've learned what safety feels like now. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, just present. For Rebecca Nolan, that changed everything. We'll stay quiet here. If you're still listening, thank you for staying with her to the end.